Hey everybody, what I'm going to be showing you today is a tutorial for a clear vinyl boxy bag. We're going to be making this out of one single piece of vinyl, the same way as we did with the mini boxy bag that we made. This being a bigger project comes together a little easier than the small ones. They're just a little fiddlier when you're working on a smaller scale, but it's very similar, comes together pretty much the same way as this does, but a little bit bigger. This can be made in a variety of sizes. I like this size. This is one I'm going to show you today. You can make it bigger, you can make it smaller, you can make it wider, you can make it taller. However you want to do it, play around with your dimensions and the size of your boxes. That will give you a different sized finished product. But I'm going to show you this size today. I like this size because it fits a lot of my simple types of tools in it. You can see those smaller scissors fit, the rotary cutter fits. If you have pens that you want to store in it, like a pencil case, you can do that. It fits a lot of things. If you have something bigger that you want to put into it, then you can just increase your dimensions, keep the rest the same, and then you can fit a longer ruler in if you made a bigger one. I actually have a quite big one that I made before. It doesn't even fit on the camera there. So that's a really big one that I've made. It's not quite big enough for this 12-inch ruler, but I made it to fit a larger pair of scissors in. So you can fully customize it to make it whatever size you need for whatever you want to put inside of it. But this seems to be a pretty good standard size, so that's the dimensions that we're going to go through today so that you can make yourselves one of these Bee Boxies as opposed to the Bee Mini Boxy. All right, let's get started. The materials that you will need for the Bee Boxy is your vinyl. I am using PVC vinyl from Geek Garden. You can use any type of clear vinyl that has enough structure for this project. I am going to do a tutorial for a lined cotton woven exterior boxy bag, but this one today is the single piece of the clear vinyl. That's one that we're going to be doing. You could use regular faux leather vinyl if you wanted to as well. That would work very similarly. It just may not have as much structure as one of the sturdier clear vinyls. So your vinyl, you will need a zipper. I'm using a 12-inch zipper by the yard. The size of your zipper will vary based on the dimensions that you want for your pouch. For the one we're doing today, 12 inches is good. I am doing a single zipper pull. You can do a double zipper pull. You can also use a pre-made zipper and just cut it down to the correct size towards the end. As far as tools, you need something to cut with, something to measure. I like to have something to melt with, pattern weights, clips. I like to have my stapler and my pliers to help get the edges lined up, and my double-sided tape. So let's get started. We are going to start by cutting a rectangle that will form the exterior of our bag. We're also going to eventually use the corner cutouts to make these little end tabs here. When we are cutting, the way that it works is this direction here. That will be the width, and the height of the pattern is what wraps around here. So consider that when you are orienting your vinyl. As I have done with the Logie pouch, this is one exterior piece. If you have a directional vinyl, you can grab that Logie pouch directional print video, and that will show you how to join together so you have a seam at the bottom, if that is something that you want to use. I like to, where I can, use non-directional prints so that I don't have the seam in the bottom, particularly when I'm using clear PVC vinyl, as it does tend to roll at the seams. And if you have a seam in the bottom of your bag, it tends to roll and needs to be top stitched down, sometimes even with 2 lines of top stitching to try to keep it flat. So where I can, I choose my prints to be ones that are non-directional or use a solid piece. I'm going to be cutting a piece from this vinyl that is 11 inches across and 12 inches tall. As I said earlier, you can do whatever dimensions that you like. Those dimensions are going to give you this size pouch. If you want to have a longer pouch, then you will cut Where I cut 11 inches, you will cut that however many inches longer you would like it to be wider. For reference, this one here, you can see, is about 7 inches wide. So if you want a 10-inch pouch, then instead of cutting 11 inches wide, you're going to cut 14 and so on. Because the PVC likes to roll, I am going to grab some of my pattern weights here and pop those down just to keep that flattened out. And then, because this is clear, I can see the lines on my cutting mat in between, and I'm going to line it up with one of the lines and the edge of the printed part of the vinyl there. And then I'm going to cut 11 inches wide and 12 inches tall. Now that we have our exterior piece cut, we are going to grab our double-sided tape and our zipper by the yard so we can get that sewn in. Just as a reminder for your orientation, this is the way that this is going to fold up. So if you are using a directional print, this side is where we're going to put the zipper, and that's going to wrap around the body. So keep that in mind when you are positioning your vinyl. And if you have cut it 90 degrees off, you can just do your zipper the other way. It'll just change the finished dimensions of your pouch a little bit, but it will still work. Grab your double-sided tape, and we're going to put it across the top and the bottom edge here. Pattern weights are just on there since this vinyl is just rolling a little bit because it's just fresh off the roll. Now we're going to take our zipper tape and we are going to put it right side of the teeth down to the right side of the vinyl. Peel off the backing paper. Oops, sorry about that. Then we're going to line the edge of the zipper tape up with the top edge of the vinyl. I'm going to leave a little bit of overhang on either side. If you're going to be using a single zipper pull, you can favor the overhang to the side that you're going to put your pull on from. I tend to just keep mine centered, and that way if I decide to do 2 pulls or 1 pull, it doesn't matter because I'm just in the habit of keeping it centered. Now we're going to go over to the sewing machine, and we're going to be sewing with a zipper foot. Oh, that's not lined up very well. Using a zipper foot, we're going to be sewing along this edge here, the width of the zipper foot. If you prefer to sew a little closer to your teeth of your zipper, you can do that. I just like that, the width of my zipper foot, just to keep a nice consistent stitch line so that my zipper is nice and centered when we get to top stitching. We'll sew one side, then we will come back around. We'll put the other side attached to this side of the vinyl and the zipper. And after we have sewn both sides of the zipper on, we will top stitch them at the same time. So let's head over to the machine. Making sure you have enough thread on your spool here and in your bobbin. I am using my narrow zipper foot here. My needle is set all the way to the left, and I'm using a 3 as my stitch length. Make sure that you do some test runs on your own machine on scraps to make sure that the tension is correct, and also to make sure that your stitch length is appropriate for the material that you're using. Some machines need to be a longer stitch on vinyl because of the way that the vinyl feeds through the machine. If they're too close together, it will perforate. So you want to make sure that you've got enough of a gap between each of your stitches so that it's not going to tear on your finished project. I'm going to do a couple of stitches and then back stitch, keeping my tails out of the way, and then continue all the way along using the presser foot as a guide, lining the edge of the presser foot here on the outside up with the edge of my vinyl and my zipper tape so that I have a nice even stitch line next to the zipper. Now I'm going to take this open edge of the zipper and I'm going to stick that down on this top edge here of the vinyl. When I do so, I'm going to make sure that the edges here are lining up. So I'm going to start by peeling off double-sided tape and then just finger pressing this down for now. It will get top stitched and then it will stay down in the next step after this. But just lining up the edges here as I pull this tape to this edge and then press down the first part. And then I want to check, and if you can see here, that's just ever so slightly off. So I'm going to unstick it and then try it from this side, lining up the edges here. I'm going to pinch there and just press that down to the edge of the zipper. And then I can continue along, pressing it onto the double-sided tape. The double-sided tape keeps everything in place and reduces any waves in your zipper because it keeps it stuck down exactly where you want it on your material. Going all the way to the other end and then checking again. And as you can see, that lines up very well there. It's nice and flat. So we will head back over to the machine and we're going to be sewing along here the same way as we just did on this side. Then we will open out this zipper and we will top stitch over where we just attached the zipper to the vinyl. A couple of things that I like to do before I top stitch around that zipper is, first of all, trim my threads here. And the other thing that I like to do is make note of which side I should be putting my zipper pull on first. So on Zipper by the Yard, when you're putting the zipper on yourself, there will be one tooth that is further out on your zipper tape than the other side. And if you start putting your zipper pull on from the side where the tooth is further out, it'll go on more easily and it will be even. If you don't put the pull on even, there was no point lining up these edges the way that we just did. So I'm going to trim the threads, melt them if necessary, which I will do also. And to mark which side I want to start my zipper pull on, I'm just going to put a little snip on the corner of the tape there. So let me just finish trimming these off, melting those. So I'm only putting on one zipper pull on this. I prefer to put my zipper pulls, if I'm doing a single pull, the direction that the zipper teeth kind of face the same direction that the zipper pull slides. That's personal preference. It doesn't matter. They slide from both sides on nylon zippers. So I'm going to put a little snip on this edge of the tape. This will get trimmed at the end, so you won't see that little snip. But if you can see there, that's where the tooth is just a little further out than the other side. So I'm going to put a little snip there so that I know when I'm putting my zipper tooth on, I need to do it from that side. And that is how I will keep my zipper tape lined up after we separate it out in order to do the top stitching. So now I can open that up and then I'm going to just finger press this open. If you find that your vinyl is relatively stiff, you can add heat with your hairdryer to make it fold under more easily, or you can put a line of double-sided tape under here and then fold that down. I prefer to just finger press and then continue to hold it as I'm sewing, because if you put tape there, you can see it a little bit. If you have particularly rolly vinyl, you could also grab a couple of clips and just pop those on there to just keep that vinyl and the zipper tape tucked under while you're top stitching, and it just can help get a more even top stitch. So I'm going to go over to the machine. I'm going to be top stitching with my Teflon zipper foot. I have my needle in the far left position again. I use a stitch length of 4. That's my preference based on how my machine feeds through the fabric. You may need a longer stitch length for your top stitching. And I use the edge of my presser foot, which I can show you here because sometimes it's hard to see on the machine. The presser foot is on the machine like this. I like to use this edge here, and I line that up with my vinyl where it is folded there at the seam. And I'm not sure how well you can see that there. I line it up there, and then that will slide down like this, giving me a nice even top stitch line because I'm using part of the zipper foot that is straight against the edge of my seam there. And that is how I like to get a nice straight top stitch next to my zipper. Now we're going to secure those threads from the top stitching. You can melt them or you can pull them through and then tie them. Then we are going to put on our zipper pull. Grab your zipper pull and take a look at your tape and see where you've marked that you're going to start from. You're going to fold the tape in towards each other and then flip the project over so that the zipper teeth are facing up with the side that you're going to start from a little bit further out. Grab your zipper pull and slide it first on to that side till it's nearly all the way through. Keep the zipper pull itself out of the way, and then slide the tape into the other side, and then you're going to look and see where the teeth are there. Then when they're lined up, I just push it with my index finger and then slide it down, and then you can check to make sure that the teeth are lined up. If they're not lined up properly, pull it back off and start again and just wiggle it through the zipper pull until you feel it click into each other, and then slide it further on so you can see if you've got the pull in the right place. What we're actually going to do now, as it's easier to sew the ends when the zipper is completely closed. If you are using zipper by the yard, the advantage is you can pull this all the way through and off. Now that zipper is closed, grab your zipper pull and just open the teeth up about 2 inches and slide it on exactly the same way, wiggling it through until you feel the teeth click together. Push it on, check it's good, turn it over and just slide it to halfway. And now we're going to work with that zipper closed, and that will give us nice neat ends. Now because we're going to be turning it back through this opening, you are going to have to be able to open this back up. Now, if you keep it more towards this end rather than slide it further up, you can just stick your finger in the little gap there to open it up when it's time to turn it. Or some of the zipper pulls, if it's a non-locking pull, you can often just slide it from the back relatively easily. So now what we're going to do is start closing up our ends. For this part, you're going to need a pair of scissors. What I like to do now is take the ends here and kind of fold that zipper out so I can really see where my seams and my top stitching are there. And I press those together to try to line up, particularly these two seam lines there. Then I'm going to grab a clip, can flip that back over now since it's lined up, and pop that in there. Then pressing the edges together. If we've done a good job of lining up our zipper here, this should be pretty flat there. Press it together until you get to the end. Now that is going to be the center bottom. grab your scissors, put a little tiny snip there, just ever so tiny. Then you can take that clip off, open it out, and where you've just marked that little triangle there, you want that triangle to line up with the center of your zipper tape. So keep that in the center. Sometimes it's a little tricky to see, but keep it centered there. Then I take a clip and I pop it over the seam on that side. And I pop it over the seam on this side. Now we're going to repeat on this side. Turning the tape out a little. Line up the curves in the seam. Put the clip in. Press the edges together. Press there at the center. Tiny little snip. Clip off. Open it back out, lining the center of your little triangle up with the very center of your zipper tape. Clip on there, clip on there. Then I like to press it nice and flat. To keep it nice and flat, I put another clip there and then repeat. Now what we need to do is cut out the corners for where we're going to box our bag. When we are sewing the boxes and sewing the side seam here, we are going to be using a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So when you're cutting your box size, you want to keep in mind that you need to add the seam allowance to the box. So I like to cut my box all at once and then sew the seam here. If you're not feeling confident, you can sew this seam at the end first and then you can cut your boxes. The reason I do it this way is because I like to use the cutouts from the boxes to put little tabs on the end of the zipper. So the measurement that I like to use for this, taking my square here, I like to do 1 1/4 of an inch for my box. However, I need to also account for the 3/8 of an inch here. So I'm going to measure in. Oh, should I do it this way? That's a little easier to show you. This is 1 inch and 1/4, but because I have to account for the 3-inch seam allowance on the end, I need to slide it another 3/8 up. So it becomes 1 1/4 inch and 1 5/8 of an inch. So it's really 1 2/8 and 1 5/8. So that's the 3/8 difference. Because this is already folded here, we don't have to account for any seam on this side. So here, 1 1/4, here, 1 5/8. It does get a little tricky to cut the PVC. It does slide a little. So you can put a line on and then cut it with scissors, or you can use your rotary cutter. Just make sure when you're doing it, you're putting a fair bit of downward pressure because that sometimes can slide around a bit. So I'm going to cut each of those corners here, and then we will make our tabs to tuck in there at the end of our zipper. Now we're going to cut our tabs that are going to go at the ends of our zipper here. I like to do 2 inches long, so this piece is long enough. And I like to do the width that there is between my seam allowances there. So it's a little less than 3/4 of an inch. So I'm going to just measure to double check and that'll be right. So I'm actually going to do it 5/8 wide by 2 inches long, and that will reduce some bulk. If you have a tab that is too wide here and it sits over the top of your seams there, when you're sewing across there, it's going to be a lot of layers of PVC and it's going to be hard for a domestic machine to deal with. So Grab your ruler, and then I like to cut it 3/4 of an inch first, so I make sure I've got a straight edge on either side. Flip it over, and using that straight edge that I've just cut, I'm going to cut this again at 5/8. Then repeat with this other scrap that already has the straight edge on it. 5/8. There. So now I have my 2 end tab pieces. Fold them in half. Grab a clip. And then I'm going to feed it into the gap there. And then I'm going to staple it. So I'm going to take this. You can press, oh, sorry, I folded that the wrong way. My PVC has a shiny side and a matte side, and I want it shiny side out. So let me flip that around. So now, into the gap there, double check that you've put your zipper pull on because you're about to sew the ends and you don't want to not have it on. You can loosen those clips there. I would keep these ones on the sides to make sure that your corners stay lined up. Flatten that and slide it in there. And you want to center your tab with the little mark that we made earlier and the center of your pull. Because they're 2 inches long, they're long enough to have a little bit of overhang there, which I really like, because that gives you a bigger gap to put your staple in. If you want to, you can staple just through the tab and the zipper. I'm going to staple just inside of the seam allowance there. Grab my stapler and staple that down. And then if you don't want to put those clips back on, that will hold it for now. So you don't even have to do that. Flip it around. Slide the other one in. Same way, centered over the center of your zipper and the center mark that we made earlier. And also make sure that the edges of your tab are lined up. Grab your stapler, stapling inside the seam allowance. Sometimes when you're stapling through a lot of layers, the prongs of your staples will stick out a little bit, so you can press those down. You can also use your pliers. That just stops it from catching on the feed dogs on your sewing machine when we get over there. So the next thing we're going to do is sew these ends here. I like to use 3/8 of an inch. You can use a different seam allowance for that, but just know that we measured the 3/8 when we were cutting our corners here. So in order to have an even corner when we box them, we want the distance from this folded edge to this corner to be the same as the distance from wherever our stitch line is to here. So because we measured 3/8, that's the seam allowance we're going to take here. If we used 1/4 of an inch when we were measuring, we would take 1/4 of an inch seam allowance here. I'm going to head over to the machine. We're going to back stitch here. When we get to the tab here, we're going to reinforce that and go all the way to the end and back stitch again, flip it around, repeat on the other side. So let's go take care of that. Make sure when you're sewing here that you're keeping your edge here nice and flat and lined up. You can put a clip here into your box to help keep those layers nice and square. The better lined up your seams are at this phase, the easier it'll be to line up your boxes when we get to boxing all of your corners. I'm going to grab my pliers now and remove those staples that were holding those end tabs in. Then we're going to snip the ends of our zipper tape. And I like to melt mine so that they don't fray. And I feel like because they're exposed on the inside there, it looks a lot neater if they are snipped and they don't fray. So I like to trim just at the edge of my zipper tab there. Then I grab my lighter and I'm just going to melt the end of the zipper tape. Now I'm going to finish off those threads Then we are going to fold up our corners so that we can sew the boxes. Going to open the zipper up most of the way. Stick my hand just inside here. And then I'm going to push on this seam here to fold the zipper down. You can, if you like, mark the corner here so that you know to center that up with your seam line, or because you cut the box on the fold, you may just be able to see a tiny little notch there. And that is what I like to use, but you can certainly do a little clip there, just like we did when we joined up the center bottom there. You would just fold it nice and flat and snip a little triangle there, and then you can easily line that up with the center seam. I push on the bottom and pull from the top, and then I line that little mark that you can barely see up with the seam that we just sewed. I like to fold this down one direction because that is where the zipper is going, rather than split that seam open. I pop a clip in the middle, and then I pop a clip at the top, but I like to kind of do it on an angle there. Right now, we're just getting the shape right. When we actually go to sew it, we'll have to take one of the end clips off to sew the actual corner itself. But to get the shape right, I like to do one in the middle and one at each end. If you have taken a bigger box, you may need to do more clips than that to get it to hold the corners right. But if you've done the same measurements that I used, then 3 should be enough. So again, one in the middle and one on each end. If you find when you're folding your corners up to be boxed, you have a corner that doesn't quite line up like this one, my preference, rather than forcing the two sides to line up, is to kind of feel where the bag wants to sit. I would rather have my seam here slightly off than have my finished product be skewed. So I imagine that this little seam that is not quite lined up there happened when the rotary cutter didn't cut through all of my vinyl layers and I had to cut it with the scissors. So I just kind of feel around, and if I've got my center seam lined up and this is the one that doesn't want to go, then I'm just going to clip it with that slightly off rather than force it and have the corner not work once the bag is sewn together. What we're going to do now is go over to the sewing machine. I'm going to sew each of these 4 corners. We're going to do the same way as we did the ends, starting at one end, back stitching. When we get here, we're going to reinforce it so that that PVC seam there doesn't try to unfold and put too much pressure on those stitches there, because the PVC does tend to roll at the seams. So back stitch, back and forth here where the seam is, back stitch again, repeat on the other 3 corners, then we'll come back over here to tighten, tie off and finish off our seams there, and we are going to be just about finished. What we need to do now is turn the bag out the right way, and then we will be finished. This PVC is quite tricky to turn when you turn it cold, so I have my hairdryer down here, and I'm going to heat it up so that it's easier to turn out. If you've used faux leather vinyl or a more supple TPU or a different thickness of PVC, you may not need the heat to help, but for this particular type of vinyl, the heat really makes a huge difference. So I'm going to apply some heat to this and turn it out the right way. So there we have it. There is our Bee Boxy made from our one piece of PVC vinyl with the single zipper pull. What I will do is put the measurements for some of these other shapes at the end of the video here. If you wanted to make a different style, you would use the same method that we did. You would just cut your zipper tape to be the correct length with a little bit of overhang. As you can see, sometimes I do the double pulls, and sometimes I like the single pull. But there you have it. There is our little boxy bag. Great size for putting in loose things from your handbag or your backpack or whatever type of bag you might carry around. Great for presents. Super, super useful, really versatile. You can make them all different types of sizes. As I said earlier, I am planning to do a version that is lined. If you don't work with this material, that obviously will be a little bit more involved, but I will get that taken care of sometime soon. I imagine probably not until after the holidays though. So I hope you enjoyed that, and happy sewing. Thanks everybody.